Good morning, students. Today we will cover the data structure subject with the topic Introduction to Data Structures. First of all, I will tell you the contents which I will cover today in this video lecture. Very first, I will tell you about Introduction to Data Structures and classification of data structure, means what different type of data structures are available and how we can classify them. Then the next topic which we'll do is algorithm and its efficiency, the basics of algorithm which can help us to make computer programs and how to measure the efficiency of the algorithm, the time and space complexity, the asymptotic notations, time and space trade-off. These three are the parameters which are used to measure the efficiency of the algorithm. After that, we will cover the model of an abstract data type, and the most important topic which we will cover today is the introduction to polynomial and representation of polynomials using linked list data structure. We covered the details of linked list data structure in the previous video. In this video, we will do the application of that one, addition of two polynomial using linked list, subtraction of two polynomial or multiplication of two polynomial. So, let us move to the very first topic, introduction to data structure. So, data structure is representation of the logical relationship existing between individual elements of data, as like my name consists of my first name, my last name. Similarly, the first name consists of different alphabets. So, it is a combination of individual elements. So, in other words, we can say a data structure is a way of organizing the data item that considers not only the elements stored, but also their relationship to each other. So, data structure basically tells us about the relationship between the data items. The data structure also affects the design of both structural and functional aspects of a program. If our data structure is not of good quality, then our computer program may get affected, because you can see here in the program there are two major components. One is algorithm. If the logic should be right, then algorithm works properly, but if the data structure is not correct, then our output may get affected. So, we need to know that a algorithm is a step-by-step procedure to solve a particular function, and the data structure provides the shape to the input and output and the processing of the data. The data structure is classified into two categories on a large level. Number one, primitive data structure, then non-primitive data structure. So, primitive data structures are those data structure which are inbuilt in any particular programming language. They are built-in data types, actually they are called as. So, these are of four types in C language: integer, float, character, as well as pointer. So, these four types of primitive data structures are basically used when we start to write any computer program. After that, the non-primitive data structure are broadly classified into two categories. Very first is the linear list, which mainly consists of array, linked list, stack and queue. All these four kind of lists are linear or continuous or sequential in nature, but non-linear lists are of two types: graph and tree. These graph and tree are the important data structure which basically reflects the real world applications which we use nowadays. So, array is the basic building block of all these linear and non-linear data structures. So, first of all, I will tell you in detail about primitive data structure. There are basic structures and directly operated upon by the machine instruction, because user do not have any fixed control over it. They are dependent on the language itself or the machine which is executing the instruction. So, in general, there are different representation on different computers for these primitive data structure, like integer, floating point number, character, constant, string constant, pointers, etc. All these fall under this category. And in non-primitive data structure, you can sometimes call it as a user defined data structure. They are more sophisticated data structures as compared to primitive data structure. These are derived from the primitive structure, or you can say they are the advanced versions of primitive data structures. The non-primitive data structure majorly emphasize on structuring of a group of homogeneous or heterogeneous data item. Like if it is an array, then it is a group of homogeneous data items. If it is a structured data structure, then it is a group of heterogeneous data item. And the most commonly used operation on these kind of non-primitive data structures are, first of all, creation, how to create this data structure, then selecting an attribute from this data structure, updating the item within this data structure, searching or sorting something. These are the major operations, sorting and searching. These operations can be performed merging, destroying or deleting or permanently disabling the data structure. So this is the list of operation which we can perform on non-primitive data structures by the help of basic data structure. So now, after data structure, the second part of a computer program, as I already told you, a computer program is a combination of algorithm plus DS. So DS, I have told you, one is of primitive and another is of non-primitive type. Now we are talking about the algorithm part. So algorithm is basically a set of instruction written to carry out certain tasks, and the data structure is the way of organizing the data with their logical relationship retained. So this is the main point, their logical relationship should be retained so that we can get the particular output from the algorithm. So to develop a program of an algorithm, we should select an appropriate data structure for that program, and thereafter algorithm and its associated data structures form a particular program. So algorithm contains the step-by-step logic execution of the program, and after combining it with the data structure, we will get a complete computer program written in a particular syntax. Every programming language has its own syntax, like C programming language has its own syntax, C++ language has its own syntax. Now algorithms efficiency can be measured by two basic parameters, number one time complexity and number two space complexity, and the third one, which is lessly used in complexity theory, is a study of algorithm performance. But the most important parameter to check whether our algorithm is working properly or not, that is the time efficiency, or you can say the time complexity of the algorithm. Now how to measure this time complexity? So first of all, I'll tell you the definition of time and space complexities. The time complexity of an algorithm basically quantifies the amount of time taken. Underline this point, amount of time taken by an algorithm to run as a function of the length of the input. So how much time an algorithm or a computer program takes to run the program and to give the desired correct output, that is termed as time complexity. Similarly, the amount of space or memory taken by an algorithm to run as a function of the length of the input, that is called as the space complexity. Means how much space is required to store that data, and time and space complexities depends on lots of things. You need to take care of these particular things. The time and space complexity basically depends upon the hardware which you are using, the operating system, the processor. However, we do not consider any of these factors while analyzing the algorithm. So these factors are basically counted during the measurement of time or space complexity of a computer program, but not in algorithm, because we cannot execute the algorithm directly on a computer. It is written on a piece of paper, but program should be executable on a computer system. Then these parameters will be required for that thing. So we will only consider the execution time of an algorithm. Now time and space complexities can be further subdivided into three parts: worst case, best case and average case. So worst case time complexity provides an upper bound on the running time, means the maximum time, I'll write it here, the maximum time taken by an algorithm or a program to give the desired output. So this worst case time complexity measures or provides the upper bound on the running time of an algorithm. It is an absolute guarantee that the algorithm would not run longer no matter what the inputs are. So you need to understand this point. This is already the maximum time taken by the algorithm. At any situation, the computer program or algorithm will not take more time than this worst case time complexity. The best case time complexity gives you the lower bound. You can say it as a minimum time taken by the algorithm or computer program to give the desired output. So input is the one for which the algorithm runs the fastest, and the average case provides you a prediction about the running time. It will not tell you about what maximum time it will take, what minimum time it will take, or it will not tell you about how much time it will take. It will give you a rough prediction about the running time of an algorithm, and we assume that the input is random. So input can come in any fashion, so output can only be predicted, cannot be predefined itself. So the relationship between the upper bound, the running bound and lower bound. Upper bound is basically the worst case, lower bound is the best case, running time is the average case. It is the relationship among between all these three time complexities of an algorithm. Asymptotic notations are used to compare two algorithms with running times fn and gn and characterizes how fast each function grows. So there are three major type of notations. Big O notation, which tells us about asymptotic less than time to be taken. The equation for this asymptotic notation is given here between two functions fn and gn. Similarly, second is the omega notation, which asymptotically tells about greater than parameter, and this is the equation for omega notation. Third one is the theta notation, which asymptotically tells about the equality between different functions fn and gn. It implies with this particular equation. So these mathematical equations are termed as the asymptotic notations, which can be used to measure the time complexity parameter of an algorithm. It can be represented by the help of this graph. So very first one is our big O notation. This notation is the formal way to express the upper bound of an algorithm's running time. So maximum time taken by an algorithm can be considered or can be calculated by this big O notation. So this is most popular, and in most of the algorithm this notation is used to measure the time complexity of the algorithm. It measures the worst case time complexity or the longest amount of time an algorithm can possibly take to complete. The maximum time, as you can see in the graph, at one particular point both function fn and gn coincide with each other. At this particular stage, both of the functions will execute in a same amount of time. But if on a longer run we will check, then as soon as the time progress, there is a difference between the time taken by two functions fn and gn. The overall equation is written here: big O of fn is equal to gn. There exists a constant c which is greater than 0 and number n0 such that fn is less than equal to cgn for all values n greater than 0. So this is our big O notation. Similarly, second is omega notation. It is the formal way to represent or express the lower bound. Now it will tell you the best case. So it means the best case time complexity can be measured by the omega notation. Big O notation tells us about the maximum time, or you can say the worst case, and omega notation tells us about the best case time complexity, or the best amount of time an algorithm can possibly take. How much time an algorithm can take can be measured by this omega notation. It is the minimum time taken by the algorithm, and generally it is used less as compared to big O notation to measure the time and space complexity of an algorithm. So the equation for omega notation is fn is greater than equal to gn if there exists a constant c greater than 0 and n0 such that gn is less than equal to c into fn, where value of n is greater than n0. Here n0 is the list of natural numbers. So I hope you are able to understand this omega notation, which gives us the minimum time, and the next one is the theta notation, which gives us average time, the average amount of time an algorithm can take to predict the output. It only predicts the output. So here the two functions fn and gn with two slots can be used. The notation theta n is the formal way to express both the lower bound and the upper bound of an algorithm. So this one gn is the, you can say, upper bound. This gn is the lower bound, and this is the average bound. This is the average order bound. So this is the equation for theta notation. Fn is equal to gn if and only if gn is equal to big O of fn for upper bound and gn is equal to omega of fn for lower bound. So both of the cases has been covered, upper bound and lower bound. So this graph tells us about the amount of time predicted by the algorithm to run the program and its time and space complexities. So now related with this one more part which is called as time space trade-off. it is used to adjust the time or space complexity as per the system's requirement. Like two major resources are there in a computer. One is CPU that directly deals with the time complexity of an algorithm, and one is memory, primary memory, random access memory, that directly deals with the storage capacity of the algorithm. So in computer science, time space trade-off means, in computer science, it is generally called as a time space trade-off, or you can call it as a space time trade-off or time memory trade-off. It is a way of solving a problem or calculation in less time by using more storage space. So if you are having less storage capacity, then you can devote more CPU time to run your program and to check the efficiency of your program. Or you can use by solving a problem in very little space by spending a long time. So most computer have a large amount of space but not infinite space, because memory is potentially infinite. We can expand it as per our requirement, but it cannot be infinite. So most of the computers are having a large amount of space. So space complexity is not a major concern. Also, most people are willing to wait a little while for a big calculation, but not forever. Now it comes about the time complexity. We can wait for a big calculation for some amount of time, but we cannot wait for till infinity that the calculation is going on and going on. So if your problem is taking a long time but not much memory, then a space-time trade-off would let you use more memory and solve the problem more quickly. Or other case, or you can say the opposite case is, if it could be solved very quickly but requires more memory, then you can try to spend more time solving the problem in the limited memory. So two cases actually arises here. One is low memory, second case is low time. So both these cases can be adjusted with the help of time space trade-off. If you are running low memory, then time can be increased. If you are running with low time, then memory can be increased. So adjusting the time and space as per the requirement, that term is called as time space trade-off. Now a space time or time space trade-off can be used with the problem of data storage. How you store the data actually in your computer system. So if data is stored uncompressed, it takes more space but less time. But if the data is stored compressed, then it takes less space but more time. So now it depends upon your computer's configuration that you want more space and less time, or you want less space and more time, which directly affects whether you want to compress the data during the storage or you want to store the data in an uncompressed way. So that can be decided by the time and space trade-off. Now the next topic which we will cover today is the abstract data type. In computer science, an abstract data type is a mathematical model for data types where a data type is defined by its behavior, or you can say semantic, or you can say the logic. What is the logic of the behavior of the program or the data, how you can store the data, and what kind of data type you can take and how you can use that data type. So from the point of view of a user of the data, specifically in terms of possible values, possible operations on the data of particular type, and the behavior of these operations, how actually it works. So formally, an abstract data type may be defined as a class of objects whose logical behavior is defined by a set of values and a set of operations. Now this picture will tell you about the working of an abstract data type. This is the application program where actually the user is working. This is the interface part which connects this ADT with this application program. So you need to understand that all the data structure comes under this part. This part is hidden from the end user. This yellow part, the yellow part is hidden from the end user. What kind of public operations are being performed on the data structure, what kind of private operations are being performed on the data structure, or even you can say what kind of data structure we are using. So array data structure, simple record data structure, linked list data structure, all these technical details are hidden from the end user of the program or the application program which the user is using. There is just an interface which connects this particular the right hand side of the diagram with the left hand side of the diagram. So this interface is called as abstraction mechanism. Abstraction means hiding unnecessary details from the user so that user can simply use the user interface of the program and can use it. Okay, now the most important topic which we are going to cover today, its basic part we have covered in the previous video. You can say the linked list data structure. In the previous video we covered about linked list data structure, various type of linked lists like singly linear linked list, singly doubly linked list, or you can say circular linked list, header linked list, various kind of operations which we can perform on linked list, like insertion an element at the beginning of the linked list, or you can say insertion of the element at the middle or the end of the linked list, deleting an element from the beginning or middle or from the end of the linked list. We have already covered all these topics with their algorithm and program in the previous video, and also we covered some operations like searching in a linked list, traversing a linked list, sorting a linked list. We cover all these kind of topics in the previous video, so you can refer my previous video for these topics in detail, the implementation of linked list data structure. Now we are doing the application of linked list data structure. So this particular topic is application of linked list data structure. So introduction to polynomials. Polynomials are the real-time application of data structure. In computer we can implement and we can operate polynomials by the help of linked list data structure. So before moving the technical detail of implementation, first I will give you the introduction to the polynomial. What is a polynomial? A polynomial is the expression in variable x which is in the form of a raised to power n plus b raised to power n minus 1 till j raised to power x plus k, where a, b, c, k, these all fall in the category of real number. N is a non-negative integer which is called as the degree of the polynomial. So degree of the polynomial, and an essential characteristic of the polynomial is that each term in the polynomial expression consists of two parts. One is the coefficient part, another is the exponent part. As you can see here, 10x square plus 26x. This is a polynomial equation. Here 10 and 26, these are called as coefficients. The raised to power component 2 and 1, these are called exponential values. So in every polynomial there are coefficients, there are constants, and there are exponential values. So now see this diagram, how polynomials are represented using linked list. So to represent polynomials using linked list, we need to keep in mind some points related with working of polynomials. The very first point we need to take care of is that, this is the first point, the sign of each coefficient and exponent is stored within the coefficient and the exponent itself. As you can see here, there is a linked list. There are three parts in this linked list. One is the info part, another is also info part, another is pointer part. The pointer part connects the node with the next pointer element in the linked list, and the info part store two things. One is coefficient, another is exponent. So the sign of each coefficient and exponent is stored within the coefficient and the exponent itself, whether it is a positive integer or it is a negative integer. In the linked list, in the info part, these signs will be stored within the info part itself. Additional terms having equal exponent is also possible, 1. So the storage allocation for each term in the polynomial must be in ascending or descending order of their exponent. So let us take this example. It is a polynomial equation 4x cube. So very first I have taken a starting pointer of the linked list. The name is given poly. This is the starting pointer. So here 4 and 3, both three informations are stored here. And a next pointer, it is the pointer which points to the next node in the list, which contains the details of second coefficient and exponent, which is 6x square. So it stores 6 and 2 as the next coefficient and exponent, and again the third node pointer will point to the third node. Similarly 10 and 1, 10x raised to power 1, they are stored inside this particular third node, and the last one 6 plus x raised to power 0. So 6 into x raised to power 0, it becomes 6 into 1, which actually becomes 6. So 6 and 0 are stored here. 6 is the coefficient and 0 is the exponent. This is the polynomial representation using linked list. Now we'll do 3 operations on the polynomials. Very first is adding 2 polynomials using linked list. So I'll take an example of 2 polynomials and they will be added. I will show you the logic of this particular addition operation with the help of a diagram in the next slide. First I will discuss what examples I am taking for this addition operation of polynomial. So given 2 polynomial numbers represented by a linked list. First we need to write a function that at these lists means add the coefficient who have the same variable power. So this is the logic. Add these lists means add the coefficients who have the same variable power. X raised to power 1 will be added with the x raised to power 1, x raised to power 2 will be added with the x raised to power 2. So for example, first number is 5x square plus 4x plus 2. I'll write it like that: 5x square plus 4x plus 2. This is first polynomial. Next one is 5x plus 5. So if I will apply an addition operation, then 5 plus 2 will become 7, 5x and 4x will become 9x, and this one is 5x square, बीच में plus sign. So this is the output. You can see here I have added the coefficients with the same exponent values. So my result came 5x square plus 9x plus 7. 7x raised to power 0 means 7 itself. So this is the first example of polynomial addition. Similarly, one more example is given here. Second example of polynomial addition, where the first polynomial number is 5x cube, then 4x square, then 2x, and the second number is 5x plus 5. So output will become this one: 5x cube plus 4x square plus 5x plus 7. Now see this diagram. It will tell you the working and the logic of polynomial addition. So this is the 5x square, this is the 4x, this is 2, and at last there is a null pointer which represents this is the end of the linked list. Second is 5x, then 5, then null pointer. So it will be added. 5x square directly becomes 5x square, 5 and 4 will become 9x, 5 and 2 will become 7. So the final result is 5x square plus 9x plus 7. This is 9x. So this is the structure of the node. The first part contains the coefficient, second part contains the power or exponent, and the third part contains the address of the next node. Now the second operation which we will perform today is the subtracting 2 polynomials. Subtraction of 2 polynomial means if there are 2 polynomials like fx and gx. So in order to solve fx minus gx, the logic here is represent 2 polynomials in 2 linked lists. L1 linked list for first polynomial fx, L2 linked list for second polynomial gx. Now create an empty linked list L3, negation the coefficient of all items in L2 and append these list item into L3. So this is the logic. Then after we add L1 to L3. So for that addition of 2 polynomial is used. So here if you are going to subtract 2 polynomial, first you need to create an empty linked list L3. This is the main logic part. Create an empty linked list L3 and negate the coefficient. So in that case, this is the subtraction. This is the example of polynomial multiplication. So in multiplying 2 polynomial using linked list, same multiplication operation can be used as like we done in the addition and subtraction operation. Every component will be multiplied with every other component. Similarly, next component will be multiplied with every other, and similarly this is the polynomial too. So just see this, the diagram. This is the last diagram which we are showing for multiplication of 2 polynomial. This is the list 1, 3x square plus 5x plus 6. This is the list 2, 6x into 8. Now the multiply operation is performed here and the resultant operation is this one: 18x cube plus 54x square plus 76x plus 48. So in this way we can multiply the polynomial. So now these are the references which we can use for further detailed study about the topics which we covered today. So this is a list of references you can refer. All references are given here. So thank you, students.